Okay, so we began with Gyansara last time. So we just did the first shloka and a little bit on the preface and introduction to the text. So we know that this is the text that is essentially targeted in bringing out the what we call as the title itself suggests that it is the essence of knowledge, and it is not essence of any knowledge, it is essence of self knowledge. So that is how we need to look at this teaching and look at this text, and when we go through the questions and the commentaries, etc., whatever Swamiji has written, you will find ample opportunity to pause, because the book is a small book, so, and the writing is also not very exhaustive. So we can spend more time trying to dwell on every single line that has been written, and think in our own language what it means, think in our own head what it means to you and how we look upon it. So the first paragraph on the introduction, which we tried to discuss, is the essence of the teachings of the Upanishad. And in that essence of the teachings of the Upanishad, we try to understand some of the aspects about our own personality. Because before we enter and understand what Upanishad wants to say about things what we don't consider mine, that means we always refer to ourselves as I and the rest of everything else as the other. And in the other, we can only expect to see, not very surprisingly, as we will understand, we can expect to see more of ourselves. So the word yatha dishti tatha shrishti, which is saying, as your vision, so your world, is almost like saying that we try to know ourselves, but in the process, in trying to know ourselves and behave what we are and what we feel and say and think, we see more of ourselves. So the vision that is being referred to is the characteristics of the mind of the individual. So that is what we call as the vision. The characteristics of the mind of the individual defines the projected universe, what is seen. And this does not take very big research to establish what this means, because we know for certain, and we know by so many examples, that as even when we are educating ourselves and we are becoming more and more informed, our vision of ourselves and what we know is expanding, automatically the view of the world changes. And this view of the world which is changing is not because the world has changed, and we know that best, because we know I was not the same today, I am not the same today as I was, let us say, 10 years back. So the world to which I belonged 10 years back isn't the world to which I belong this now. But then if I physically try to evaluate what were the things that existed 10 years back and what are the things that existed now, they might have been changed. But that change is quite trivial compared to the change that my mind has undergone. And this change that my mind has undergone has created what I call as, what this text creates as, the creation, the shrishti, the aspect that I see as the other. So the key line in whatever that has been said here is that while we are changing our vision, we are actually progressing in our spiritual journey. So when we say that I have made spiritual progress, most of us will cite the experiences of the world as it exists and how this experience has got transformed. So that is what we call as personal, what you call change that has occurred after having started a spiritual seeking or spiritual learning, or going to the place where spiritual teachings are given out. So we will often cite what we now experience, and which was quite different from what we have been experiencing something a few years ago. So if an anxious person was there few years ago and he has started a spiritual journey, he can come back or she can come back and say, my anxiety has reduced. So what does that mean? Does it mean that there are no anxious events happening or events that trigger anxiety? No, it doesn't mean that. It just means the mind of the individual who picked on events and became anxious now doesn't pick on events and become anxious. So the mind has changed, and the spiritual modifications or the spiritual changes that are expected have taken place. So that is the meaning of the first quotation that Swamiji has given here, Yata Drishti Tata Shrishti. The second one, second bit of the teaching that he has given is a very key bit of the teaching, which is called the teaching of the idea of dharma. That means, what is the reason an object is what it is, or what is the reason that something that we identify with a name and form takes a specific image or a specific experience, and what is the basis of that. So Swamiji goes systematically, and then he explains that when we say the word cow, an image comes, a sound appears and an image comes. And then we say that I have now got the thought of a cow or the experience of a cow. And if there is somebody who did not have this thought, he will not get they will not get the experience of the cow. Similarly, someone who has not seen a cow, not heard about a cow, and happens to see or listen or exactly have it in their midst, is unable to define what is being seen and what is being experienced. This inability to define is also a specific experience. And the paragraph there condenses all of this to say that in essence what is happening is there is only a thought, or there is a modification in thought. And this thought or the modification in thought can be given the label of cow, or it can be given the label of I don't know. Either which way, this modification itself makes that experience possible. So when someone would say, for the thought of a cow to appear, there must be a cow in the presence of that person. This is an afterthought or an after analysis of what has happened in the first place. Because in the first place, this is not what has happened. In the first place, there was only a thought modification. And the entire process in this whole paragraph, the discussion in this whole process in this paragraph is, for an experience, what is it that is happening that will allow that experience to sustain? So Swamiji here concludes that nothing is happening beyond what is called as a vritti, a modification. And when he uses the word modification, what he means is that there is a flow in thoughts in the mind. So the mind which is static without flow does not have thoughts. But in the mind which is in flow will have thoughts, and this flow of thoughts is the mind, and this flow of thought is the essence of experience. So typically we can think of, when we talk of an experience, and we later will come to the idea of the threefold participants or threefold categorization of an experience, is there is an experiencer, there is an object which is experienced, and there is a relationship between the two. So this threefold categorization is also part of this vritti, this what we call, what is in essence defined as thought modification. The threefold modification is also a thought modification, nothing beyond. So it's only that much. So when we say that everything that we see is in essence thoughts, it is saying that the only equipment that we have which is allowing us to have some impressions or some sensations is the mind. In the mind, all of this exists, and therefore the essence of all that exists is nothing but vritti. So that is how the entire argument is going. So we have to be careful whenever we refer to all this knowledge, and then refer to this knowledge as nothing but a vritti. So then once we have understood that it is a vritti, it's a thought modification, then we also come to know that for this thought modification to sustain, is there something that is required? Because the word modification automatically begs the question, on basis of what is it modifying? That means there has to be some unchanging truth upon which a thought can modify. So this is another logical, or you can say systematic logical inquiry into the teaching that is being given out. So Swamiji argues that there has to be a principle that is unchanging for this experience of modification to exist. So that is how the first idea of the invocation verse will start coming up, by saying that this thought modification is sustained because of the existence principle, which is called Sat, and that existence principle is the essence upon which there can be thoughts, or there can be a projection of thoughts, there can be a movement of thoughts. So that nature of the individual is the nature of consciousness, and the rest, everything else, is only the change of flux. And because that basis is pure consciousness, he calls that as the essence of the knowledge that we are seeking. The self-knowledge essence is nothing but the pure consciousness, which is the basis. So if you go from the outer to the inner, or you can say the world, the experience of the world, and the basis of this experience, you can say the world is the projection of the mind. The mind itself is nothing but thought modification, and the essence of all thought modification is pure consciousness. So that is how those three steps come in. That is how Swamiji has placed those three steps. Then he says, as is tradition, we start a verse with an invocation verse, and the very purpose of an invocation verse, he says, is that it will enable the writer and the student to associate with what is being taught and what is being spoken. There are many Upanishadic invocation verses which are said as a joint prayer between teacher and student. We say a prayer in the beginning of this class, which is picked from the Upanishads, which we call as the Sahana Vavatu verses, which is essentially saying the teacher is trying to say in that verse that may we, that means the teacher and the student, the study happen more very diligently, very seriously, very sincerely, and may we in this process become more illustrious in our own study. That means we become more effortlessly brilliant in our study. And at the end of it, the teacher also requests that let there be no misgivings, because we are making this study in a joint way. So this is the prayer we utter when we start our class. Here Swamiji has given a different type of an invocation, where he is invoking the grace of a deity whom he calls as Rama, and he has later on explained why he has chosen Rama as the deity he is asking for blessing this process. And then in this verse itself, all that he is saying is prostrations with devotion before Sri Rama, the most adorable Lord and my teacher. I expound the essence of self-knowledge for the sole purpose of gaining abundance in the self. So already we know why the teacher, or why this author is focusing on abundance in the self, because he has clearly understood that the real unchanging truth is self-knowledge. Everything else is changing, and it is in a state of flux, it is in a state of modification. Therefore, the permanent abidance in the self is what the writer is claiming as the real purpose of making spiritual seeking. And he is seeking the grace of his teacher and devotion from the Lord to help him both write and communicate this. One interesting aspect about Swami Tejomayananda's compositions and commentaries is that he will give his commentary also with quotations. So in this particular verse alone, immediately to explain this verse, he has quoted a few lines from Goswami Tulsidasa's composition. And those lines he elaborates on why he has chosen Sri Rama and not anyone else as the person to whom he is offering the prostrations. Subsequent to that, which is part of our discussion today, there will be another quotation in Marathi from Samarth Ramdas. So what is the quotation that he has given from Goswami Tulsidas is that there is this, the reasons why he has chosen Sri Rama as the Lord to whom he has offered his prostrations and seeking his grace for this smooth communication of this truth. So why does he chose Rama? He says that it is Rama's beautiful personality, not because it is just beautiful, but because he is also very wise. And with wisdom, he says, normally there will be a certain level of arrogance. But in the case of Sri Rama, we find that with wisdom, he becomes an absolute ocean of compassion. So he calls him Kripa Nidhana. So ocean of compassion, or an abode of compassion. And then he says that normally such an individual who is so wise, such an ocean of compassion, will be kind only to people of his rank because they belong to a different class. They don't belong to rank and file. But in the case of Sri Rama, it is exactly not like that. It is almost the opposite of it, because he chooses to give his compassion to people who have no support at all, who have nothing to fall back on. So he refers to them as anatha. So the word anatha appears to be only orphans, but actually anyone who doesn't have support is an anatha. It is not necessarily that someone is an orphan, therefore he is an anatha. Anyone who doesn't have support. So to such people, he is not only help, he is not only the only help, he is also the only hope. So that is how this wise and ocean of compassion Sri Rama is. And then he says that he does it akamahita. That means he doesn't do it with any reason or any purpose which is motivated with any outcome. So almost like saying his compassion is just flowing, and it is flowing without making a choice of where it flows. So that choice of where it flows becomes something that is like a directed flow. So this interesting aspect about akamahita, I have read in some other place, that one devotee, one Western devotee, was started getting mystical experiences, and he was driven to, or he was automatically got connected with teachers of occultism. So teachers of occultism gave him some hints about how he can harness his potential, etc. And out of curiosity, in his first meeting with Sri Ramana Maharishi, he asked him that how do I use these occult powers to perform miracles like Jesus and Krishna? So this was his question. He was a Western devotee. He was a person in the police department in Chennai. So he traveled to Tiruvannamalai to meet Ramana Maharishi. And Ramana Maharishi spoke something like akamahita. So what he said is, do you think that Jesus and Krishna performed miracles because they wanted to? And this was all he said. That was enough hint for Mr. Humphreys, who had asked this question, to understand the meaning of akamahita. That means miracles can't be performed by choice. That is what Ramana Maharishi wanted to emphasize. For a person of the purity of Jesus or the purity of Krishna, in their presence, compassion, love, and welfare of others automatically happens. And when it automatically happens, for everyone else, it will be a stupendous movement, a stupendous moment, because they have never seen anything like that. So because they have never seen anything like that, they will term it as a miracle. So it is often known but that many such people, when they do in their presence something like this happens, they immediately withdraw to say that this is owned by me. This what has happened is owned by me. They just completely withdraw. All they can say is, this was the will of God, not mine, not done by me. It's a will of God, as the God wills. So in that way. So this idea of akamahita is something like that. You don't have to really choose to do, things get done. Almost like saying unconditionally, as Swamiji puts it, and selflessly. And then Swamiji says, who can equal this person like Sri Rama, when he can even offer nirvana? That means he is giving liberation to an enemy like Ravana, to whom anyone would have said he can only have anger and animosity towards a person whom he has come to destroy. But in case of Sri Rama, even the person whom he has destroyed is actually granted liberation. So that is the meaning of Nirvana Prada.